Good evening, Alan here. Welcome to Discovering Buddhism. Hope you're well. Tonight we do our fifth module in the Discovering Buddhism series, which is death and dying. Very topical, something that's an inescapable subject. Every time we turn on the news, we hear the mortality rate of coronavirus and so on. So, hi Julia, good to see you there. So, yes, this is something that we don't need to be reminded of too much at the moment, but still, we're going to look at it in a little bit more depth. So, hopefully you've got the handouts. I sent, I think there are 4 things. There's the course outline, which shows you what happens in the 4 weeks. There's tonight's summary. There's the reading, the supplied course readings, they call them. Quite a lot of the material there. And then there's Nick Rebush's transcript of his teaching. Now, Nick Rebush is a very senior person in the FPMT organisation. He runs the Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive, was ordained very early on by Lama Yeshe, and disrobed, was a monk for quite a few years. Now he's a lay person, and he gives very good teaching on the subject. And it's a very long transcript. I think it goes for maybe 100 and something pages. And he takes 6 weeks to cover the topic. We take just 4. So, so there's those 4 things. And then there's some other materials, optional reading. Maybe I'll just mention that. We'll come back to that. Let's do our 5 minutes of breath meditation to get ourselves in the right frame of mind for studying and meditating. So find a comfortable position, sitting, lying, or whatever position is comfortable, and we'll just settle the body and mind with some breath. So we just now come into our inner world, what's happening in our body, what's happening in our mind. Time to let go of the busy day. Time to let go of the busy mind. And to help do that, we bring ourselves into the body, just checking our body is comfortable, evenly balanced. The floor or the chair. Shoulders relaxed. Eyes closed or just gently open. Moment to just spend a few moments appreciating the opportunity we have to sit together. How wonderful it is. Do some practice, do some study. Take care of our mind. The most important thing. Doing our practice to improve our own minds, ultimately to become liberated beings so that we can help other beings into liberation and enlightenment. Now just focusing more on the breath, watching how the breath enters and leaves the body. Just standing aside and watching. Nothing to do, nothing to control. Just giving now our full attention to the breath, following it all the way into the body, all the way out, staying with the breath, resting our mind on the breath. Being aware of when we lose the breath, when we wander, when we go to a different time, different place in the mind. Noticing that. Just letting go, that distraction, and coming back to the breath. That's the practice. Patiently coming back to the breath. Just relax. Hopefully we'll get through the session without an NBN dropping out. If it happens, it happens. So just do our best and see if we have the karma to stay connected. So just as I was saying, plenty of readings as usual, plenty of readings in the course readings, Nick Rebush's transcript, all digitally provided. Then the reading list, which is just below the course outline on that one page. The first one I've got there is the Foundation of Buddhist Practice, which is that series put out by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Thupten Chodon, covering Introduction to Buddhism, particularly directed to Westerners, and very wonderful collection. So I basically followed His Holiness's topic guide, because I thought I couldn't improve on that. Nobody could. So that's good to have. Of course, it's quite a big book, quite expensive. Can get it online from Amazon. Then I've got How to Enjoy Death. How to Enjoy Death is probably the most comprehensive collection of materials on the Tibetan approach to living and dying and death and rebirth, written by Lama Zopa. So it's a collection of all his teachings over the years on this topic, edited by Rabina Courtney. And I noticed it was quite reasonably priced on Fishpond, the online bookseller, for $53, which is incredibly cheap because it's actually beautifully bound in leather, and it looks a bit like the Bible. And so I'm sure I paid a lot more than that when I bought mine. So that's good if you want to, probably the most comprehensive coverage. By Wisdom, 2017. It's also available, I think, under a different name at the moment. I think it's like a different version with a different name, probably less intimidating a name than How to Enjoy Death. And then there's The Joy of Living and Dying, which was on the reading list that Turkey had when she taught the subject. I actually don't have the book, but I've ordered it by His Holiness. That's Holiness the Dalai Lama. 97. Life, Death and After Death. So that's a nice little booklet put out. It's one of the free books that you see around VI. Free they say, just donate a gold coin for it. And pretty sure it's available on Amazon for $1 or $2, as most of the free books are. By Lama Yeshe, that one. Life, Death and After Death. Sleeping, Dreaming and Dying. It's one by His Holiness, also a very good book, which I have got, but I haven't looked at it for a while. So there's plenty of good background reading there if you want to go a bit deeper. So hopefully after the 4 weeks you will be able to enjoy death. It's a big ask. Not sure if I've got to that stage yet, but it's a wonderful, wonderful aim. So let's have a look at what we're going to cover tonight. So just those 3 topics: why contemplate death. So this is really looking at why do we put so much emphasis on this topic of death? Why do Buddhists spend so much time morbidly thinking about death, as outsiders probably think? But actually, as His Holiness says, it's not the aim. It's not just to be terrified, terrify ourselves, but to just get our priorities right. Realize what amazing opportunities we have while we're alive, to prepare for after death. What happens after death? So impermanence, we'll look at that, which of course is the amazing teaching we now have with the coronavirus on impermanence. It's all around us. Incredible destruction of lives, destruction of routines of business, economies. We're seeing all that graphic detail at the moment. And then the 3 points: learning from our own mortality. So this is those points you might have heard mentioned when death and rebirth are mentioned. The certainty of death, that's actually certain. The uncertainty of the time of death. And the only thing that will help at the time of death is our mind, our spiritual practice. So that's the essence of the Tibetan meditation on death awareness meditation. So on the, you see that quote there, fantastic quote from Lama Tsongkhapa: this life is as impermanent as a water bubble, etc. So this those couple of lines really sums up the whole content of certainly what we're going to cover in the next 4 weeks, and the content of death and rebirth, according to Tibetan philosophy and teachings. How quickly the body decays, that's impermanence, and how our actions follow us. Black and white karma follow, as they say, at the time of death. So, so why do we put such emphasis on this? Well, His Holiness says, actually, I think he expresses it very well. It reminds us of the special opportunities of life as a human. So we do need to remind ourselves of that. And if we have time tonight, later, we'll do the meditation on the precious human life, appreciating our human life. Because that's part of, an important part of appreciating out being alive is part of the meditation and the study of death and rebirth. So, so because we're so preoccupied with the world, what they call the 8 worldly Dharmas, which I had to look up to remind. I knew that there was a couple of them. One is wanting gain, that is, wealth, wanting to have acquisitions, wanting to avoid loss, having good reputation, wanting to avoid ill repute, disrepute, wanting to have pleasure and avoid pain, and wanting praise, wanting to be liked and praised rather than blamed and disliked. So those things, basically, it's being attached. It's about attachment, wanting more of what we see as the good things, and being averse to the bad, loss, pain, and so on. So these preoccupations distract us from the fact that we have this mortal body, and it could end at any moment. We're so busy propping up the world, making sure things are going well, that it distracts us, as His Holiness says. So to help this, we contemplate this as being human, and the drawbacks of being born as one of the unfortunate classes of beings. So this is the rebirth aspect of the topic. So we'll do it next week. We'll look more at this a little bit of the options of rebirth. That it's not just possible to be born a human. That's very, very fortunate if you're reborn a human. But there are other realms, and none of them are as favourable as the human realm. If we're going to be reborn, if we're going to be reborn in what they call samsara, then it's going to be difficult to find another human body. So we spend some time looking at what the other possibilities are. And this motivates us. And we see how unfortunate, how much suffering there are in the other realms. The most obvious one for us is the animal realm, which we can see very graphically. So we want to avoid that unfortunate rebirth. What will ensure that? Watching our body, speech and mind as much as possible, avoiding negative actions and doing positive actions. Practicing the 6 perfections, if we're Mahayana Buddhists, 6 perfections, and dedicate the merit to a precious human life. So we actually create positive states of mind, and we wish that those effects of having such positive states of mind will steer us towards a positive rebirth. So this is, remember, if you remember that those different levels of practice, the level of the level of the person of beginning stage practice, which is all of us, certainly me anyway, is to at least have a positive rebirth. We can't be liberated or enlightened in this life. What we want to do is at least have a positive rebirth. We can't be liberated or enlightened in this life. What we want to do is have positive rebirth, another precious human rebirth in the next life, where we can continue our practice, continue along the path, and become liberated in future life. So one thing I was trying to think, what's something similar in everyday life to thinking about death and unfavorable rebirth. When we were at school, it's going back a long time, in the last, I think, year or two of high school, we're all, of course, all in the 17, 18 at that stage, just doing the high school certificate. One thing they did show at school was this movie. The road toll was very high, and all the governments were very concerned that how the fatality was just this skyrocketing number of deaths every year from people dying in car accidents. There was no seatbelts in those days, no breathalyzer. So we were shown this very graphic documentary at school about car accidents. It was actually following ambulances going out and cleaning up after car accidents. Completely uncensored. Probably wouldn't be able to do it these days. But I remember, as a teenager, seeing such unbelievable carnage on the road, from drink driving, speeding, and so on. It definitely had the effect of slowing me down and deciding I definitely will be a careful driver, as I think my fellow students also. So that using shock tactics can have a very positive effect. So this idea of thinking of death, it's not morbid, it's actually to help us to actually what's positive, do what's most meaningful in the short time we've got. Another example probably would be the anti-smoking ads, where they show you pictures of shocking pictures of people with lung cancer. So sometimes shock tactics definitely can be very beneficial for guiding our behaviour, changing our behaviour. And so this is really what's going on with the death meditation. So it needs some meditation on how privileged, how important this human body is, how rare it is, how impermanent it is, how temporary it is, how it could end at any moment, and what special opportunities are, how we can use this human body with human brain to create causes for a good future life. It's only in this human body that we've got that chance. Certainly as an animal body we couldn't. But that's really what it is. It's to help us to spend our time wisely. Human life is rare and shouldn't be wasted. So then there's a few questions there. Now, some of these topics come from Choki's materials when she taught the subject. So that's one from mentioning our own death and appreciating our life. So this is just asking us to contemplate, make it personal. So what death means to us. And so there's not really any answers here. There's no sort of Dharma text to look up. It's just asking us to look inwards and contemplate these particular questions. The first one, what are the thoughts and feelings that arise in relation to imagining our own death? Probably something we don't do very often, but imagining our own death. I thought, actually, if you've lost a loved one, at my age, I've lost both my parents. So what's happening when we go through that very difficult time, watching our parents pass away? It's actually, we are seeing our own death as well. That's also what's going on. So this is quite helpful to have this experience of being someone who's died, because it does. We don't have to imagine our own death. We can just sort of see it there. We're going to be doing the same thing. So we just watch the mind. How do we feel? We see that happening. And for me, it's obviously fear. We're going to have to do this. Not just we're not immune. We're all going. No one gets out of life alive. It's a sad fact. So what are the most important? Again, these questions, good questions. What do we want to see looking back in our life? His Holiness, in one of his teachings in that book, he said he's never heard of anybody who's on their deathbed regretting not having done more overtime at work. So it's so true, and it's even you sort of think about how we put work. Obviously, we've got to work and we've got to earn a living, but to ask that question, how am I going to regret not doing more overtime when I'm lying on my deathbed? Good question. Yeah. What regrets do we have at the time of? Well, that's the same question together. What things are we grateful for at the time of death? Good one. What things are we grateful for? It's probably something to do with our mind, having led a meaningful life, having met the Dharma, thinking of perhaps refuge, a body, the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, how helpful they were. So maybe if we have a guru, how amazing it was to have a guru, to have met the guru. So these are things, as I say, just to contemplate. No, there won't be any sort of given answers. And just reminded there of the initial level practitioners. That was the expression I was trying to mention. So we have to all, at one stage, be an initial level practitioner, looking beyond the happiness of this life, seeing the impermanence of this life, seeing the possibility of an unauspicious rebirth. It spurs us to engage in what is beneficial for lives to come. We want to create the cause of a good future life. So this is bringing us now to what is death. So this is as I'm not a doctor, but certainly having seen friends and relatives passing, we all know that the scientific Western view of death is very physical. When the person stops breathing, no pulse. Remember when my father passed away, the phone call to me at night, I'll forget it, of course, it's the nurse ring up and says, your father has no pulse. No pulse. So, so this is definitely how Western medical science judges whether the person's alive. No pulse, no respiration, and sometimes they might put the thing that reads whether there's any brain activity. I think it's the EEG, electroencephalograph, to see whether there's any brain activity. No brain activity, then the person's dead. Very different in the West. Sorry, we'll probably look more at this next week. when we do the death process. So the consciousness can be there for some time, and for great meditators it can be there for week, 10 days, more than a week, more than some several weeks sometimes, while the person's the physical body's not functioning, but the body is very fresh, no deterioration, and it's the person's consciousness is still in the body. So His Holiness has actually mentioned this so many times that he's actually seen some of his fellow monks passing away and the consciousness staying in the body for many weeks or days, up to 10 days, 2 weeks. So good example was Geshe Dawa, the great Geshe, who was VI's teacher for many years. He passed away a few years ago, and there's several days where actually no deterioration of the body, but his consciousness still in the body. So very different views physically of what everything's very sanitized, so usually avoidance really. I think I remember seeing my first corpse actually when I went for a holiday in Bali. I think I was backpacking in the 70s probably, and lots of wood burning was a body being burnt, and a lot of Balinese all dressed, and so the body was there burning while they were really having a celebration. I thought it was just extraordinary. A little bit ghoulish because sometimes the body would need to be sort of poked by the bamboo sticks to make sure the fire was still burning it. Quite an eye-opener for this naive little schoolboy straight from Sydney. So we don't see that, of course. Much of the world, the non-Western world, has death happening in the streets. I'm thinking of India, but we're very much protected, which means that we're not really aware of it. It's something that we just put away. So there was this amazing story that Lama Zopa told us once. I think it might be in the book How to Enjoy Death, where there was a funeral. I'm not sure whether he actually saw this or someone told him about it, where there was a funeral in India burning the body, and the body was not dead. And the poor person on the funeral pyre started to try and get up, and they were so terrified, the relatives and the very good typical Lama Zopa story to demonstrate many different things, including the fact that the consciousness can still be in the body when the body's ceased to operate. So, impermanence. The fact is that the body's impermanent, just like everything else in the world. And why is everything impermanent? How can we see impermanence? Of course, there's the gross level where we see things. Probably the plant world's good. Gardeners, we see plants die, flourish. We put the seed in, they grow, the flowers come out, and then they die. So we can have the perennials, the annuals, the perennials, and then we see different plants lasting different amounts of time, sometimes very old trees, but they eventually die. So gross impermanence. The cup breaks, the body dies. Killer, subatomic level, things are changing. That's why. So that's why we see this decrepitization, the aging of the body, because each cell is not being reproduced as well as the previous one. We don't just regenerate our youthful looks. Things get older, wrinkles happen, particularly as you get older. It's much easier to meditate on impermanence as you get older, I can assure you. It's having just turned 70. So it's all around. So there's the the physical, just changing moment by moment. The walls of the room, which look so solid, changing moment by moment. And at the very microscopic level, the coronavirus is so minute, so tiny. Such a tiny thing can actually cause death and destruction in a scale that the world's never seen before. So the importance of what's happening at the invisible level. Then His Holiness actually mentions some really interesting types of impermanence. It's not just, not the coronavirus, I put that in there. The Twin Towers, which I think had just happened when he was giving these teaching, how sudden that was. We can probably all remember that, how quickly those Twin Tower World Trade Centers were destroyed, both the planes being used as missiles. The natural bushfires are another good example, which we've actually just witnessed last summer. How incredibly fast and unbelievably destructive they were. And then on our everyday life, I mean, none of us are not affected, really. Even just getting on the bus, wearing masks and social distancing. Even the very bus that goes from my front door. I've just yesterday read in the paper that one of those buses, Route 442, had a coronavirus carrier on it last week. If you're on that particular bus, you need to monitor yourself. So there's that. There's people who've lost their jobs, social, the finances completely collapse, financial well-being of so many people. And then there's the whole social implications where we can't actually get together and express our human need for company. All that. So the cultural attitude is an interesting one, because he mentions the attitudes to women, how much that's changed, even in our lifetime, one lifetime. I remember when I was at university, I mean, there's almost no women studying law. I think there was maybe half a dozen. And there was women were basically steered into arts, teaching, perhaps nursing, librarianship, and so on. So this has changed since the 60s and 70s dramatically. And women are expected, or can be still. This is still a gap, of course. Still the glass ceiling, but certainly much better than it was in the 60s and 70s, 400 or 500 years ago, and how democracy has slowly come to parts of the world. Other parts still basically feudal. Some are under dictatorships. How communism rose and fell, and there's still some hanging on. So government system, even the systems of government, changing. Attitudes to marriage. Just my parents' time, if you were married and had a child, my aunt had a child out of marriage, and she had adverse consequences for the child. Nobody wanted anything to do with the mother or the child. So my aunt had to go and have the child secretly in the country. This is a family secret, of course. It only came out later, and have the child was adopted out, luckily. So all this has changed now, whether you're married or not, have children. It's just nothing. It's not going to work, and our colleague or our boss has died overnight. Something happened to me. Someone in my age, who was my boss, had a stroke and died overnight. Very much loved colleague at work. So these are all incredible teachings if we think about that, on impermanence. reminding ourselves of our own mortality. Everything that arises due to causes and conditions is transitory. What we see, physical world, is subject. It arises due to causes and conditions. What we call dependent arising, dependent on to these what it's actually sometimes called 3-point death meditation on death, or 9 points. So as His Holiness said, this sort of meditation, we're not going to actually do the meditation tonight, but we'll probably do it, maybe do it next week or in the coming weeks. We'll just sort of talk it through tonight. This meditation is subject to death and impermanence. It's all around us. No one's immune. So this develops compassion, helps develop compassion. So the 3 points in the meditation are the certainty of death, the uncertainty of the time of death, all the physical things of the world, all the people in the world, no help at the time of death. So we'll just sort of go through each one of those points, some quite interesting teachings from both His Holiness and Lama Zopa. First one, death is certain. So 3 sub-points there. Death will definitely come and therefore cannot be avoided. So very famous movie stars and billionaires will have to face a time where they have to leave the body when it's time to die. So that's the second point of the first, of the certainty of death. No one's immune, can't be extended, can't get an extension, can try medicine, but if the karma is run out, then we have to leave the body and die. And the last point, which is really important one, is that it's even though we're alive now, time is running out. The clock's ticking for the moment of birth. But there's all these other things that we have to do. Big one, at least a third of our life. That means that those mundane activities take up so much time, just so little time for practice. Since death, more detail about why death happens when it does. He says the first time these 4 different things could happen. First one is exhaustion of the lifespan. That means the karma to be alive is run out. So the second one is the exhaustion of merit, which is that the supporting conditions. Merit is really a different, probably it's not medicine. You need these physical conditions those conditions are supporting the karma to be alive. So if you don't have those, even if it's got karma to be alive, if you don't have the merit to have food, you'll die. So that's the second situation. And then the third one is both the karma and the merit of the supporting conditions run out. No food, no karma to be alive, and no supporting conditions. And the last one is there's a destructive karma. So this is where there's a violent accident, an untimely death. This intrigued me because I thought, how could you die, have an untimely death if it all depends on karma? So that these destructive karma, His Holiness calls them, things that could happen to bring our life to a close or to being lived. So that person still has the karma to be reborn, say a human, still has a very likely chance of being reborn as a human after his death, because he still has the karma to be reborn human. His karma is not exhausted at the time of death due to the plane crash or the accident. Okay, so that's going into a little bit more detail there. So tomorrow or the next life will come first. This is one thing that Rinpoche, Lama Zopa Rinpoche often says. It's unsure. When we go to sleep, will tomorrow come first or the next life? We die in our sleep. Something to remember. And His Holiness points out, whenever it happens, it's more likely than not, almost always, it'll be a time that we're busy. We're busy getting our affairs in order, and suddenly we die just before we get time to do that. So we basically we think we're going to live a bit longer. So that's the other point is that there are so many causes. The body is so fragile. There's so many causes of not being alive, and more causes than there are of being alive. So it's just quite miraculous that we can stay alive. So there's the need for food, shelter, and clothing, and so on. I actually haven't had an accident. I haven't had the misfortune to die up to now, because there's so many things that could have happened to bring my life to an end. And of course, lost many friends to disease, accidents, and so forth already. So the fragility. The point is the fragility of life. And Sonos also points out things that we use to keep ourselves alive often are the cause of our death. Okay, so a good thing is the cause of their death. And sometimes the food that they're eating, eat a bad prawn or a mussel and you've die of food poisoning can happen. Things that were supposed to meant to sustain your life killed you. So here we go right now. The only time we ever have for practice is now. That's very profound. The only time we ever have for practice is now. Okay. Now we're going to have to actually decide to do it now. If we decide to do it tomorrow, that's not now. We're not doing it now. Okay. So the mind, according to Tibetan Buddhist, all Buddhist teachings, is that it's infinite chain of moments of mind without beginning or end. So, so this leads to that's true. Then the mind at the moment of time of death is very important, because that's mind is going to be the one that will go to the next life. So what won't help? This is all part of the meditation on death meditation. Thinking about what won't help, and these are the things that we usually go to help for in the current life. So friends, if we have trouble, we rely on friends to help us, relatives for love and affection, support. So our closest, best friends and relatives and nearest and dearest people, they can't help. They can't help, because if the time of death is come, they won't help. So this is why it's often said, Zopo has said this many times in his teachings, that the best way to die is alone, with supportive Buddhist friends who won't disturb the mind, be sort of crying or making an emotional scene. So dying alone or with the right people, supportive people present, is the best way according to the Buddhist way of dying. Other thing that won't help is material resources. So all the wealth that's been accumulated, no matter how much, not going to help. Or the fame, the most famous people, often those in the public eye, will pass away just the same as everybody else. That doesn't help. The highest of the kings and rulers, just as the same as the peasants and the poor people, always have to go through the same process. And the body won't help either. The body that we've, His Holiness points out how much time we spend on the body during our life. Of course, we've got to support, we've got to feed it and make sure it's supporting our life. But the quote I've got is that all the pleasures this body enjoy up till now are last night's dream at the time of death. Okay? They're all just a memory. But the karma we created to secure all those pleasures goes with us. Okay? So if we've created unskillful actions of our body, speech, mind to accumulate wealth, exploiting people, unethical conduct, and so on, then the fruits of those actions, those negative actions, will be what we take to the next life, even though we leave all those enjoyments that we had from the unskillful actions. The karma goes with it. So these are the karmic imprints, like seeds on the mind. It's like seeds that will ripen in the future. So the decision, the conclusion is that if only thing that will help us is Dharma, which is actually what we've done with our mind, and what practices we've done, how meditation, how we've calmed the mind, what merit we've accumulated in the mind. The afflictions remain fresh and energetic unless we make an effort to counteract them. And so it does need effort. As Holiness says, that is the natural tendency, as we've been living so long with unskilled with attachment and ignorance, that's more natural. It's more easy to create negative actions than positive. So we need to exercise some effort to counteract those what he calls fresh energetic afflictions. Fresh energetic. So it needs some effort. So I remember doing retreats. Lama Zopa and Lama Yeshe always say that because you're doing something in a retreat, we're doing something very positive for the mind. So because we're going against the stream, probably our own natural stream of being more influenced by negative action, and the society's stream, which is more going towards attachment and so on, that obstacles come up because you're pushing against the actual force, the negative forces. So it can be obstacles can come up, so that we can find that little thing. We might find that everything's perfect for the retreat, and then we fall and we break something, or there's some sort of obstacle comes up to prevent us actually doing that retreat. That can happen. You can see it sometimes in real life. Everything seems to be just perfect for doing something positive, and then there's an obstacle. Maybe, I remember when we did the French retreat last year at Toulouse, Vajrayogini Centre. Lama Zopa Rinpoche ran a 3-week Vajrayogini retreat. And just before the retreat started, there was a French airline strike. And so it meant that a very large number of the students couldn't actually get there on time, the time the retreat started. And Rinpoche, the Lama Zopa Rinpoche, scheduled the retreat to start on a very auspicious day. So he does astrological observations. What's the best day for the retreat to start? Very important to choose the right day, which he'd chosen, but because the people hadn't arrived, we had to postpone the actual start of the retreat by a few days. And he did say a few times how that was unfortunate, because there were a lot of obstacles that come up because we couldn't start on that day. And so we actually had to change the retreat so that we actually did prayers to clear the obstacles. We spent many days doing these obstacle clearing prayers so that the retreat could continue. And good example of how affliction, how obstacles can come up when you try and do some positive actions. And then that wonderful quote from His Holiness, I've never heard of a dying person regretting they did not work more overtime. Right, let's keep things in perspective when we think work is... I'm retired, so I can have the luxury of saying that that's not, I don't have to do a lot, I don't have to think about work a lot at all, which is a great luxury. So 10 past 7, so I thought let's, giving us time, provided we stay connected, to do a short meditation. And now I've got listed, I think, meditation on constitutive mind, but I thought that probably it would be better to do the meditation on appreciating our human life, and we can maybe do continuity mind another time. So I thought I'd do that. It's actually a good meditation. It's very upbeat, and it covers the points in the notes for page 1 of the summary for tonight. The great opportunity we have by having a human body, being born into this human body with a human brain. So what we do is actually, instead of just sort of skimming across that, we come to each point and we actually stay with that and make that point sink into the mind. I make our mind one with that point. So we look at how important the human mind is in having a human brain with a human body. So we can spend some time thinking about unfortunate rebirths in animals, because we can actually see animals. We could have been born an animal, we weren't. We were born a human being. So how much better it is to be born human. So we can look at the suffering of animals, particularly those in the wild, how staying warm. So we just use a few other analytical reasonings to consolidate that point of how amazing it is that we've been born human, how fortunate. Then the next point is where we're born. We're born in this particular country. So we look at the facilities that are available. Basically, we've got enough food. It's a calm. There's no civil uprisings. There's no political oppression. We're not being told to practice or not practice a particular religion. Very few natural disasters, though there are more of those with climate change. But compared to some other parts of the world, basically good conditions. And then we look at what's available in the way of the Dharma teachings and teachers. We look at how amazing it is that Buddhism has come to the West only in the last 50 or so years. We have teachers, we have centres, we have qualified lineage, teachers of lineage, great masters like His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. We have Dharma texts, all kinds of digital, non-digital formats, multimedia. The last point is that we have the time, some leisure time. We don't have to spend all our life working. And we have some inclination, some interest in developing spiritually, developing the mind. And so we are incredible. That must have come from previous practices, previous good karma collected, previous interest in the Dharma. And then the final point, particularly for this topic, is that all these perfect conditions are so fragile, they can end at any moment. There's definitely death will come, definitely the time is uncertain, and the only thing that will help is our spiritual practices. That's it. That covers those things. So let's do that, and we maybe just over 15 minutes. Okay, so get comfortable. Let's spend a few minutes just settling the body and mind. So just coming into a calm, centered mind, using the breath. We begin our practice on appreciating our human life, sometimes called the precious human rebirth. We're contemplating what a good physical situation we have. First of all, our body, our physical body, the human body that we are inhabiting. The human body with a human brain, human body that is basically healthy, has all its faculties, all the senses. The human brain, which has unlimited potential for development, unlike an animal brain, animal body, thinking how unfortunate would it have been to be born an animal, overwhelmed with small intelligence, ignorance. Unable to improve their mind, take care of their mind. Often suffering in incredible heat or cold conditions. Often they are food for other animals, living in fear of being eaten. Even our pets, who are well looked after, still don't have the intelligence to understand even one line of Dharma. So, not only do we have this human body, but we have been born in the human body in this very privileged country, a safe country, a country free of political oppression, with respect for good facilities for health, education, adequate food, shelter. Not only born in the human body in a very favourable location, but a location where we have access to the Buddhist teachings. So few followed the lineage from Buddha's time, received the teachings and transmissions through the unbroken lineage all the way back to the Buddha. Great masters like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who are living Buddhas. Not only that, we have the body, auspicious location, do some study, do some retreat. So rare. Thinking of some places where human beings have human bodies, but they have to spend their whole life working to survive, day and night. No leisure time. towards spiritual development, mental training, improving our mental quality. So many have all the other qualities but no interest. How did it happen?